Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. Thank you for joining our monthly CS Mastermind webcast, where we bring together professionals from across the customer experience ecosystem, from customer success managers to support specialists and everyone in between. Today's session is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've helped more than 40,000 customer-facing professionals from almost 100 countries develop the skills they need to excel. Whether you're in customer success, support, or any customer-facing role, you can find the right program for your learning style. You can find all the details of our offerings on our website, successcoaching.co, or in the chat, where Ashley will provide links and any coupon codes we're offering. Oh, yes, we're offering a coupon code today for our 12-week executive education certificate program that I deliver through the University of San Francisco. It is one of my favorite products. We get to spend 12 weeks together, do 10 coaching calls, and talk about how to connect the dots between what we teach and how to apply it in your world. It is a great program. If that's something that you're interested in, check that out. I think we're saving $500. Wow, by August 1st. So jump on that if you're looking for training. CS Mastermind is all about real-world expertise, no theoretical frameworks or abstract concepts here. We dive deep into practical advice and actionable insights that you can apply immediately in your role. Today, we're exploring managing escalations effectively, and we're taking an interesting view of it, but we'll get to that in a minute. Quick housekeeping before we begin. We are recording this session, and we will share the replay next week. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for questions. The most upvoted ones will get priority during our discussion. LinkedIn Live viewers, feel free to post your questions directly in the comments. We've got somebody that's going to relay them to us. And for smooth sailing, please keep the chat window for commentary only. So if you do ask a question in the chat window, Ashley is going to redirect you to Q&A. She's not doing that just to be annoying in any way. She's doing that so we can have a smooth experience. Now, I'm excited to introduce our fantastic panelists who will be sharing their insights with us today. As usual, I will let them introduce themselves to you all in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Jaime.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jaime Moquin. I'm a self-described education enthusiast, customer champion, and strategic doer. I've spent my 25, almost 30-year career fully in the education space, fully been, I would like to say, around the desk, from classroom teacher to higher ed admissions to building global ed tech programs and leading high impact customer success teams in the ed tech space. I've been able to, I really love finding that sweet spot where it's people, process, and technology that all come together to move institutions and their students forward. I've worked in some pretty complex systems, from B2B to B2B to B2C to B2C to everything in between. So when I'm not mentoring a team or working with customers, you can find me outside hiking on a trail or leading outdoor trips. And I'm really all about growth, connection, and meaningful purposes. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jaime. And you're in Iowa?
I live in Southeast Iowa.
Southeast Iowa. Awesome. You got a lot of outdoor stuff there, huh?
We actually do, believe it or not. Go read my LinkedIn post today. I talked all about going spelunking in Iowa and how that leads to when you're stuck sometimes in decisions or your career. So go check it out.
I love that. That's awesome. Thanks, Jaime. Unfortunately, Jennifer had a last minute emergency she had to deal with, so it's just going to be the three of us today. So Jennifer, sorry you couldn't make it. We'll have you on another program. So that leads us to, and I was so much hoping that we are going to have three J's. I only have two J's, but our final J of the day is Justin.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Justin Holman, and I am currently a customer success executive at Avaya. And before Avaya, I was working as a senior CSM at an ed tech. I was at Microsoft as an onboarding and customer success manager, and was a founding member of a customer success team for a small startup. I have been in the SaaS world now for about 5 years. And prior to that, I was on a college campus, much like Jaime, as the executive director of partnerships and community outreach, and managed a team of about 80 people where we did nothing but try to connect with our partners and expand our relationship to not only help our organization, but also the community at large. And a couple of years ago, I was actually gifted from a senior manager a success coaching class. And that was my introduction into Andrew. 2 years ago, he asked me to participate in a previous panel, and I'm back for the second time. I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. It only took you 2 years to get back here. So no, but that's great. We're happy to have you back. And you know what? I think I forgot to mention this in our prep call on Monday. You know, Todd and I met when we were both at Genesis Telecommunications. So we actually have our roots in call center and telephony.
Yeah. Yeah. Really exciting stuff, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. All right. So I want to launch in today with something that might sound counterintuitive. And for those of you that saw my LinkedIn post yesterday, there's going to be no surprise here. We're here to talk about managing escalations effectively, but I want to suggest that everything you've been taught about escalation management is backwards. Here's the controversial truth. The fastest way to resolve an escalation isn't to fix the problem. It's to fix the relationship first. I know what you're thinking, but the customer is screaming about the bug, the missed deadline, the broken integration. And yes, those things matter. But here's what I've learned from watching hundreds of escalations over the years. Customers don't escalate because of problems. They escalate because of broken trust. Right? Think about it. You've probably had customers experience major issues who have never escalated, and you've probably had customers escalate over relatively minor problems. The difference isn't the severity of the issue. The difference is how much trust existed in the relationship when the problem occurred. And this completely changes how you should handle escalations. Most CS professionals immediately dive into problem-solving mode. They gather technical details, they loop in engineering, they start building timelines for fixes. But what if I told you that's exactly backwards? What if the most effective escalation managers spend their first conversation not talking about the problem at all, but rebuilding the relationship foundation? So today, our panelists are going to share some strategies that go against conventional escalation wisdom, approaches that prioritize trust repair over quick fixes. That sometimes means slowing down to speed up, and that turns angry customers into your strongest advocates. So let's start with a challenge to conventional wisdom. Tell me about a time when you deliberately chose not to lead with technical solution in an escalation. What did you do instead? And how did that change the outcome?
Yeah, and Andrew, I can hop in and take this one. This is actually a not uncommon scenario, but very recently we had a pretty technical escalation that came across my desk. And this technical escalation was one that caused our client a considerable amount of grief, and they were not happy about it. Obviously, they have things to do, goals to meet, deadlines to meet, and they came to us and they said, "Hey, we're really not happy about this. We need to fix it immediately." Well, excuse me, this was one of my accounts, and I think the first thing that I did was exactly what you had already touched on. I humanized the situation. I am a technical person, but I am not a technical expert, nor am I the most technical person at our company. So for me to jump right into technical fixes isn't even something that I would want to do immediately. So what I did was I slowed the situation down. I listened. I kind of gave them an opportunity to vent. I gave them an opportunity to let me know why they were ticked off and what they were ticked off about, and really kind of gave them an opportunity to more or less use me as a punching bag. But while doing that, I acknowledged the fact that I can understand their frustration. I acknowledge the fact that, yes, I understand and I fully get that this has been a major disruption to you and your business, and we want to get it resolved. And I think using phrases like, I feel your pain or I understand what you're going through, those sometimes we have to put our empathy hats on. And I think that was a really good example of me using empathy instead of diving directly into, oh my gosh, this is my client. I need to fix this as quickly as possible. But before I can fix anything, I need to hear them out, and then I need to understand the problem. And then usually once they felt heard, they are typically much more receptive to beginning to discuss workarounds and technical solutions. So I think at the end of the day, it's about humanizing the situation and listening, actively listening, and fully understanding what the problem was before you jump directly into those fixes.
This is why AI will never replace customer success managers, right? It lacks the empathy, it lacks the ability to humanize things because it's not freaking human. Jamie, you got anything? You got a
Yeah,
story?
I took it a little different approach when I thought of a scenario. When you're working with institutions, you're working across a it's like lots of little companies inside of a big company. And I had an issue once where my team and hearing constantly that there was just all these different issues, but across all the different areas. Like this team had an issue, and this team had, like, let's say they were working with the financial aid department, somebody's working with the business office, and it was just nonstop escalations equally across the team in all different areas. And I finally just called a timeout for a second. And I heard their side, and I met one-on-one with the different departments on their side and recognized what they were doing. And I kind of realized like it's a way bigger problem than all these technical issues. I uncovered that there was misalignment on that campus and that organization where they weren't even talking to each other or had no common goal or direction. We had some issues on our side because, they would meet with, let's say, me and tell me something, and I wouldn't bring it back to the rest of the team. And that was happening, let's say, if Justin was on my team and others. And so my approach here was in this particular situation, I knew we had an executive sponsor on their side. And I got very humble and called that executive sponsor just one on one and said, look, I got to be brutally honest. Like things aren't going well, and there's lots of issues and escalations. And I heard him out from his side. And I kind of said, it's us too, and laid them all out and said, okay, how can we move forward? Because I think it's bigger than just the little tiny issues that everybody keeps bringing forward. And that was not always well received when I said to the team, like, time out, we're just going to pause for a second because I think we have some bigger things than just all these little issues. It's kind of the death by a thousand paper cuts, right? We needed to address what was really happening. And that was both of our teams weren't working really well together. So I think just being humble and recognizing that and recognizing that it is having impact because he on the other side was hearing the same thing from all of his people that I was hearing as well too. And to just be vulnerable, to have those really honest conversations. And in this situation, it was best to go to that sponsor that I had on their side, who was their leader, to be able to come together. And if we were aligned, then we knew we could probably work through the teams being aligned as well too.
I love that you took ownership. You admitted that there were gaps on your side. That
Yeah.
typically opens up the other side. Okay, there were gaps on our side, and there's this, I mean, there's a psychological angle to this as well, right? It's when somebody confronts danger, right? Whether it's actual danger, like life-threatening danger, or it's, oh, this is going to look bad, to my boss or what have you. The amygdala sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus, triggers the fight or flight response, and during escalations, customers are literally in that psychological state, right? So you got to got to move away from that. You got to reduce that. So a follow-up question: when you have an angry customer on the phone or on a Zoom, what are the specific words or phrases that you use to rebuild that connection before you even mention the technical issue? And I know, Justin, you mentioned, I hear you, I understand. What are some of those other, I mean, maybe not just the words, but how do you approach that situation in more detail? I want to provide folks with some tactics.
I think for me, it's about acknowledgement. And I know there are so many phrases that we can pair with acknowledgement, but taking the time to acknowledge that, yes, there is a problem. And yes, it was most likely something that we did on our end. I want to own the solution, but I also want to own that conversation and just saying things that reaffirm possibly the trust that has already been built between myself and the client, and reaffirm the fact that I am here to help, and I've helped before, and they've leaned on me before, and they can lean on me again, and they can trust that I will resolve this issue.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I like to really, if one, customer success folks always want to jump to a solution. So you have to turn that part off of your brain. You have to be like, I am just truly listening. I'm not solutioning right now, because it's just sort of human nature there. But I like to acknowledge that the issue is having an impact on X. So I recognize right now that that issue is having an impact on your students being able to register, because some saying that I hear you and it's causing you pain, but to take it the step further, to actually recognize the pain it's having on their business at that moment, I think can go a long way too. And it also shows that you're really listening. So you have to be. So that's one of the things I like to actually acknowledge. So I'm understanding and they can see that I see the real impact that it's having on them.
Well, that that active listening technique of restating what they're telling you in your own words, and
Yeah.
also connecting the emotional piece to it is incredibly powerful. Because what I have found, and I was talking to you before we started the webinar about my experience with that espresso maker, as well as my fridge, right? The most escalation scripts focus on gathering information, right? But information gathering feels like an interrogation when somebody's pissed, right? So you can get past the pissed part. You gotta, like you said, Justin, you gotta let them unload. You gotta give them the space to kind of unload things. And then when you follow that up with, okay, here's what I heard you say, and you connect that emotional piece to it, right? They're like, okay, Andrew understands what I'm saying. Andrew understands what I'm hearing. I'm sorry, what I'm feeling. And that's going to put that person in a much better state. So how do you handle the customer who says, I don't want to hear excuses, just fix it? What's your strategy for relationship repair when the customer is explicitly rejecting relationship repair?
Yeah, for me is first evaluation, is it something we can fix or can't fix, right? And everybody knows what's right for their business. If it's something that can be fixed, I like to be able to break it down if you can. Oftentimes things aren't always a quick fix. And so if any of you work at places that everything is a quick fix, let me know. And so if it's not, I like to be able to break it down and find out what is the most crucial piece of their issue, so we can get some small wins along the way. If it's possible to do that, and it's this, and this. Okay, what is the most important to you? What is that? And to be able to get those small wins. If you can show that you can get a win with them, then I find that it often opens the doors for a deeper sort of relationship and strategy. It's the way that they're going to view building their trust.
Well, sometimes the customer who says they don't want relationship repair actually needs it the most.
Yes.
Right? They're just protecting themselves from more disappointment.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and I think I often take the approach where if I have a customer that says, look, this is what needs to happen, I don't want to hear excuses, just fix it. At that point, I take a step back and I say, you know what? I understand. I'm not going to make excuses. Let's focus purely on the outcomes. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do. And here's when you're going to hear from me next. I kind of give them a little timeline of exactly what I'm going to do over the next 4, 8, 24 hours and let them know when they're going to hear from me. And then hopefully that fire goes out pretty quickly and we can circle back. And maybe I can give them a 2-minute rundown of here's what we did, here's what we're doing, here's what we learned, and here's what we can do to make sure this doesn't happen in the future.
When customers say just fix it, they're often trying to just regain control, right? Acknowledging that need for control can be more powerful than rushing to solutions. But what I see, and this is a common trap, is this is where most CSMs give up on relationship building and just become order takers, right? But that guarantees the next issue is going to escalate. And when the customer throws out, I don't want excuses, that often translates to, I need to know you're taking this seriously, right? Which is actually a relationship request in disguise. So let's talk about strategic vulnerability. Some of the best escalation managers I know will actually admit fault, even when it's not entirely their company's fault. And if anything, they'll say, I'm sorry we're in this situation. When is taking ownership of problems you didn't create actually the right strategy? Or is it ever? I've given that advice before to a team and their management has contradicted me. And I'm sorry, I disagree. I think, their concern is, well, they could use that against us in a lawsuit or something. And I'm like, okay, well, the 1 out of 1,000,000 times that happens, you're right. Right. But I mean, how much better is it to own up to whatever your role is in the fuck up, than to, show that, like you said, Jamie, that vulnerability? How much better is that for your relationship?
I think you have to, it's not something you overuse or overdo, right? I don't think it's always this first thing. Oh, I'm so sorry we did that, right? Because then I think you're leading down a path of them never thinking you can do anything right. You're actually
Perpetually
setting yourself
apologizing.
up. Yeah. And so I have used that sometimes when it's been just like a cut by 1,000 paper cuts, or it's little things, or it's just tension, sometimes personnel tension back and forth between the customers of just it's hard to say because it's kind of like a gut feeling, right? It's like we've got to do that because you know that you're never gonna get over that speed bump with that customer. They're just gonna be adamant until there's some level of you guys don't know what that you admit to some fault, and then as much as you can pivot from that. But I think it's something too that can be overused where it will come to backfire you. I'm curious, Justin, what you were thinking on that too, because that's a hard one.
It is a hard one, and I think we almost have to acknowledge that there's a fundamental difference between accepting fault and taking ownership. And yeah, there are times when accepting fault might be the default way to go on that, and just saying, you know what, this was 100% on us. I was actually working at Microsoft in 2022 when Teams went down nationwide. And you know what? There was no one to blame except us, and taking ownership of that and saying, look, this was our fault. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. But I always want to take ownership of the idea that the customer experience is my responsibility. And a lot of times those outages really impede on that customer experience. So although I'm not necessarily accepting fault for something that a third party might have done, but I still want to accept the idea that the relationship and that their experience is my responsibility. And the technical root cause might not necessarily be the fault of anyone at the company, but again, that experience failure is on me. And
Well,
that's where.
Oh, I like.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was done. I was going to say that's where I really live.
And I'm not suggesting that you take fault for something the customer clearly did. But I think that trust is built through vulnerability. So when you admit fault first, you're essentially saying, I'm safe to be honest with.
Right. And I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, I have taken unearned ownership and used it as relationship capital with my key stakeholders. even though this was kind of the fuck up of your team, I want you to tell your boss that a big part of it was us, right?
Yeah.
And so what I did though is I made a deposit, and it paid a dividend in future interactions. Not only did it completely change the relationship, but it gave me I earned these credits. So when, not if, when something happens again, because stuff's going to happen, right? I had that bank of credits, and it was something I used to coach my team on all the time. But something that you need to remember: if you don't own the problem, someone else will define it for you, and usually that's a lot worse, right?
Most definitely.
So now let's move past okay, so we've kind of established, all right, we gotta kind of break down that barrier. We gotta get the amygdala and the fight or flight, everybody calm down, the trust built up, the vulnerability there. Now we're at this point where we need to go to engineering or to product to actually prioritize something. So what's your approach for getting engineering or product to prioritize your escalation when they have 10 other fires burning?
Yeah. So one is, I'll jump in here because
Yeah, go ahead.
uh, you, as your role in CS, you're that glue with the customer that is interacting internally with all these different areas, which means you have to have relationships with those areas when there is issues and when there's not issues. So I'll just put that out there because we could probably have a whole webinar on that topic in and of itself.
100%.
So you need to understand how they operate. You need to understand what they do, who they are, and not just run to them when you need something. So I like to sometimes think about use them wisely, just like yourself in your CSM role. You have infinite demands and finite resources. And so a lot of that is prioritization of, let's just say, your book of business. So if you're a CSM and you have your book of business of like, which escalations, they're not all equal. Which ones are going to move the needle forward for that customer to become a reference for you, to renew, to not churn, whatever you need there. So that's one way to approach your escalations, is that risk and reward, so to speak. The second is work with your team to see if you have escalations that Justin might have or Andrew might have. And if we could move those together, we could impact more customers by doing that one thing. And I think that's where you gain a lot of trust from your engineering and other teams, because you're thinking about it in the context of the good for all the customers, but also the good for the organization. And then when you do have those one-off situations, you're probably more likely, but together you can help more of your customers than constant one-offs.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. What it's not a one-off thing, engineering. This is happening over and over again. I'm trying to make you look like the smartest people here for fixing this problem.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that a little bit, I often have to remind, especially CSMs coming into the field early on, that to be a customer success manager, it's not just an external position. You are managing those relationships internally just as hard as you are managing those relationships externally. Because when things get bad on the external side, you need to lean on your team on the internal side to make those fixes. And if you don't have those relationships, if you don't have those conversations and make those phone calls and send those emails, you're stuck. You're stuck. And that escalation then becomes this purgatorial thing where you don't know where to go with it and you don't have anyone that can help you. And that's why I think managing those internal relationships is a really underrated part of what we do every day.
That's a great call out. Most CSMs think they're customer advocates, but they're actually internal salespeople. Your job is selling urgency to engineering. And the thing that we need to remember is engineering gets dozens of urgent requests per week. If you're not translating customer pain into business impact, you're just noise. So love what you said, Jaime. How can we kind of group all this together? Hey, by the way, there's a cohort of customers you're experiencing. And every escalation is either building or burning your credibility with internal teams. So you need to choose your battles wisely. But one other suggestion, and we talk about the importance of empathy throughout all of our courses, everything that we talk, I mean, almost all these webinars, we touch on empathy. So I want you to think about this, everybody who's listening, from a stakeholder psychology perspective. Engineers, they want to solve interesting problems. So frame your escalation as a puzzle that they can crack, not just another fire drill. So let's quantify the impact that this escalation has and spin it in a way not only presents to engineering, hey, this is a potentially significant revenue risk, but hey, this is a puzzle. How would you like to solve this puzzle for our customers?
And, as voice of customers, right? That's what they'll say. CSMs are, the voice of the customer. We hear the good, we hear the bad, but also feed that back to your team, because you didn't do the fix, right? And when that customer says, "Oh my gosh, what you guys just did impacted me because of A, B, and C, we can now do better." It's our job to also feed that back to the engineers, because that also helps them align to know that what they're doing on the back end is actually having real life impact on the front end. And I think that just helps build just general relationships back and forth too, to feed that back, that it had a positive impact. That's our jobs, to feed that back to them, because they wouldn't know.
Awesome. Hey, just a reminder, folks, we'll get to questions from the audience here in about 5 to 7 minutes. So please throw your questions into the Q&A or upvote any of the questions that you see there, and we will answer questions based on most upvotes. All right, next question to you two. How do you decide when to communicate more versus when to go quiet and just execute?
Well, I think for me, it's about knowing my clients' communication preferences. Are they a highly emotional customer that needs that constant reassurance, or are they a little bit more calm and they just want to see results? So I think, and I don't mean to broadly put all of my clients into one of those two buckets, but I think we all definitely know who our more emotional clients are, who the folks that are calling us every chance they get, and who the calm ones are. And I really think that based on those preferences is how you can decide what the best way to communicate is. I don't know that going dark or going, super quiet is really ever the best way.
No.
But I think if you understand the preferences, if you are providing progress status, and again, understanding their kind of a emotional state with the account, I think is a great way and a great place to start in deciding how I want to best communicate those escalation issues.
I agree with you completely, Justin. The only thing I would add to that is, if you have a customer who is that just needs those constant updates, find the balance, because just letting we're working on it, like doesn't go anywhere either.
Right.
It could be, you've told them and say, "Hey, on Thursday I will give you an update." Okay, that might be all they need, right? Because it's also easier on you to manage. And like, I know, I just listening as we started, Andrew talking about the refrigerator repair and stuff like that. God, there's nothing more annoying to me than somebody who keeps telling me, "We're working on it, we're working on it." Okay, you've been working on it for 4 months, like, and so
Right.
just make sure your communications are meaningful, but 100%. Some are like, "Good, don't talk to me until it's done. I'm good. I trust you." And others are like, I need a status update of today the engineer looked at it. Okay, great. And they're good to go. So that emotional and that intelligence of your customers is critical there.
Well, I think
100%,
there's
Justin.
an expectation management angle here, right? Over communication often creates this expectation of instant solutions, and under communication lets you control the narrative timing. So there's a strategy here. As a matter of fact, whether it's an escalation or not, I've even coached teams. When a customer sends you even a benign request, make sure you're not responding within 15 minutes every time, because you end up they end up
Yeah.
getting, why isn't it responded in 15 minutes, even though you have a 24-hour SLA? As a matter of fact, even if you know the answer to the question, I've sometimes responded to customers and I delayed my email to go
Yes.
out on purpose because I don't want them to get. I don't. It's like the Pavlov's dog. Every time the bell rings, the dog, the dog's mouth waters. Right. What we don't want to do is we don't want to set this expectation with our customers that they're going to get an immediate response. The other thing to remember is from a customer psychology perspective, some customers will interpret frequent updates as this is more complex than they initially thought, right? Which increases panic and then gets that whole psychology thing, the whole fight or flight response. You actually end up doing damage to the relationship, or you make it harder to navigate this escalation. And what I've seen from the best escalation managers, they know when to disappear and come back with solutions, not just updates. But I think what you're both saying is it's about understanding the communications frequency. It's about setting appropriate expectations up front with the customer. If you're going to tell them I'm going to reach out to you whether I have an update or not every morning and just let you know the progress, then do it. If that's too frequent, then just say, hey, it's going to take us some time to get through the triage, and then I'm going to need to check on development. So how about every other day I'm reaching out to you with a note and saying, here's where things are at.
It's a great point to say that over communicating can cause unnecessary anxiousness and
Yes.
essentially be a roadblock to what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's understated and something that we all need to acknowledge a little more frequently.
100%. Now, how do, and we're going to get to questions here in a minute. I got two more for you two. How do you identify and negotiate alternatives when you can't fix the original problem?
Yeah, I think the most important thing here is to really understand what they're trying to accomplish or what the outcome they're trying to achieve that they think this fix is going to give them. I think if you don't know that, then you're just going to be running in circles and going back and forth between, your engineering team, and we can't fix that. So I especially find this true, and sometimes when it's kind of a one-off situation where they're requesting for something. And if you can sit down with and spend that time and kind of scope it, like don't focus on the solution to it. What is it that they're trying to do? And then sometimes you can get creative within using the tools within the system that you have. And then I think there's times that then you can come back to them, and I think you just have to be honest. Let me go back and solution what we think we could get to your outcome, and use, keep focusing on those words. And then sometimes you can actually use this to your advantage to push the customer. They might be thinking here, and you can push them further to use another module or another component of the product they might not be using. That's kind of how I tend to approach it. If you got to really know what is it that they're trying to do. And that takes some time and a lot of listening and the right questions to
Well,
break that
sometimes the
down.
customer's stated need isn't their actual need. So
Right.
great
Yes.
CSMs are translators who find better solutions than what was originally requested. And this is where tools like the 5 Whys can be
Yeah.
very powerful. Help me better understand what you're trying to achieve. What I used to find when I had my team members come to me and say, customers asking for X, the first thing I'd ask them is, okay, help me understand why. Let's peel back the onion. And what we found more times than not, and when I'm saying more times than not, I'm not saying like 51% of the time, I'm saying like 80, 85% of the time, we could actually do what the customer's asking for us to do. It just wasn't the way that they thought we should do it or the way that they perceived. And when you're in, especially the cloud world these days, software as a service, where we're all running off of a single tenant, part of the lower cost to ownership and the lower barrier to entry is you may need to adjust some of your workflows. And what that points to is we did not do a good job with the change management aspect of rolling out our solution. Justin.
Well, there's not a lot I can say that you two haven't already said already, but again, I think sometimes the best outcome of an escalation is not necessarily fixing that one little thing that might need to be fixed. It's really about delivering greater value as a whole. And when, like you said, when you can peel back the onion on an escalation and figure out what that business need is and what the impact is to them, then you can say, oh, you know what? Well, we can fix this issue, but here are two other things that we might be able to initiate or implement that will really deliver that greater value and help you with the outcome that you're looking for.
When you solve a problem that they didn't know they had, you become indispensable. Instead of just a vendor, you become a partner. Right? It's incredibly powerful. All right, last question for y'all, and then let's take questions from the audience. What's your playbook for using the resolution conversation to actually expand the relationship or uncover new business opportunities? I don't know if either of you saw my post on LinkedIn, but that was an actual call recording where this individual turned this escalation into potential new business. And like I said, it sounded to me like the customer was being genuine. They weren't just giving them lip service to get the solution pushed through first. So what's your playbook for using that resolution conversation to actually expand the relationship?
Well, I think the first place you have to start is stabilizing that relationship, making sure that the reason they came to you has been resolved. I don't think you can even start talking about upsells or expanding solutions until that initial fire has been stabilized. Once I have that stabilized, then I want to have a debriefing conversation where let's talk about what we learned. Let's talk about how we fixed it. Let's talk about how we can avoid this in the future. And then I want to reframe that more or less as momentum, as to say, look, here's what we learned. Now, here are some of the things that we have improved. Here's some of the things that maybe we took back to product because we've seen this happen again and again. And I'm seeing new ways that we can help you with this problem.
Love the
And then it's
momentum.
just about connecting the roadmap. Every organization has a roadmap of upcoming implementations and features, and say, if you can look at that roadmap and say, hey, we just talked about X, Y, and Z. Now we are actually real life implementing these. And you know what? Maybe we can include you in a pilot program. I know that is absolute best case scenario, but it's a way to, again, really, really take a problem and turn it into an opportunity.
I love the momentum principle, right? Resolution creates forward momentum. So don't waste it, right? We want to use that energy to propel the relationship forward. Jaime, you got anything to add?
Yeah, the one thing is that's why it's so important to know the why. Because if you can take a look back at over their whys and start to find some patterns or some commonalities, then you can come at that point when the relationship is ready to be say, I've been looking back and we've spent a lot of time talking about it sounds like you want to improve X. I've got some ideas on how we could do that. And so that's why so all these escalations actually gave you some insights into something else that is really what the root problem is. Like, maybe we need to focus on your workflows or how you can leverage the workflows within the platform to be able to do that for you, which, can then open up into all sorts of different things, whether that's professional services or modules or products or things. So,
Well, they not only give you insights, they give you credibility currency, right? You just prove
yeah.
that you can solve hard problems under pressure. That's exactly when customers want to give you more problems to solve, right? So the customer who just saw you handle their crisis is going to trust you with their strategy. And that's when you stop being a vendor and become a partner. All right. Let's take some questions. Can I get you both to take a look at the Q&A window? And while I refresh this, if there's anything that jumps out on that question list, hit that answer live button, please. Remember, don't use the typed answer. Hit that answer live button, and which once again does not mean that, like for example, Jaime wants to answer that first one. Justin, you can answer too if you want. She didn't claim that from you, but I'm just going to give you a couple more seconds here to and you want to use that most upvote, that little pull down menu at the top, and hit the refresh button that shows which ones we're going to go with first. And
There's
for the
some good ones
record,
in here.
if either
Yeah,
of you
there are.
didn't claim any of the other ones, we'll answer them in order. Let me know when you're done looking at them.
These are some great questions.
Our audience always asks great questions. I wish we
Yeah.
had enough time to answer them all. All right. Are we ready to start going through them?
Sure.
All right. Our first question comes from Roger. Roger, thanks for joining us. Thank you for the question. Roger says, I'm currently having a client where we have a lot of misaligned expectations and not in a good point where we can completely fulfill their expectations. Any suggestions on how I can navigate this? Jamie, you wanted to jump in first.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to solve. Believe it or
Really?
not. Yeah, yeah. And so
So
I think
you're a
there's a few.
masochist like the rest of
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
I don't know. I like this challenge because it's probably one of the most rewarding things when you see customers and you align them, and then all of a sudden they're like your raving customers. So I think you have to pause for a second and what is it that's misaligned? Because I think you have to break that down. Is it a misalignment in service, in like what you're going to do for them? Is it a misalignment in what they think the product can do? Is it a misalignment in just the who's going to do what? Because misalignment can be a pretty big category, and misalignment in what they think the product and the functionality can do is very different than misalignment in like, well, I thought, especially in implementation, I thought you were going to do that. Well, I thought we were going to do that, right? And then you just are in this vicious circle going down. So
Could it be something that sales said you could? I mean, that never happened,
um,
right?
that never happens. And I think it happens less and less now that all calls are recorded because there are times where go back to the beginning sometimes if you can and see where this misalignment started happening. It didn't all of a sudden happen probably when they came to you. So make sure you do your due diligence or have that information if they were handed over to you from an implementation team. I have gone back and looked at sales calls because it wasn't that sales said something wrong, it might have just been the way it was interpreted, and then it was never addressed along the way. So one is find what is the root of that misalignment, clearly articulate those with the customer. It is not always a good call, and sometimes you're putting them all out there and you have to take it, as Justin was saying. Like there's no defense, like you just have to take it, and then you have to tell the customer, I'm going to go back and I'm going to like evaluate all of this and come back what I think are, and then come back. Don't try to solution it all at the same time when you're getting their misalignments, and it's okay to have the awkward silence. It's okay to hang up the phone and not feel like you're finished, because CSMs want to finish everything usually. And that is the best way. And once you have to understand their expectations, then see which ones you can do sort of, sometimes it's one by one. It could be, okay, you know what? We're going to meet every Wednesday for the next 3 weeks. And sometimes putting in that little extra time up front will save you hours and hours and hours 6 months from now. So then you have to evaluate just sort of the best way to tackle those. But honestly, this is one of my favorite things to work through with customers. I mean, it's not always fun, believe me, but, but but I have found if it's a service, if it's a product, and sometimes you recognize, honestly, holy cow, this was not a good match from the beginning, and maybe they shouldn't be our customers. And you think about an exit strategy, a breakup strategy too. I'll be honest, that has happened sometimes from this.
I've been there as well. I've been there in the
Yeah,
breakup stages as well. But it sounds like it's almost for you. It's like what I was saying before about engineering. You like solving that puzzle.
yeah,
Right? It's a little
yeah.
puzzle for you. Justin, you got anything to add for Rogers?
I'm a big fan. I think anytime there's misalignment, that is when there needs to be a lot of information gathering, and you're probably not going to get an immediate solution. You're not going to get an immediate answer. And sometimes you have to bring the account team on, both your company's account team and the external partners account team. Bringing them together and talking through some of those things can be a huge time saver, rather than trying to do it through 500 emails that get misinterpreted, misread, and sometimes just missed altogether. So I'm a big fan of bringing people together and trying to figure out where that misalignment came from, and talking through it strategically.
And something that we should always remember, every escalation is actually a gift.
That's correct.
Right? It tells you exactly where your process breaks down and your customers lose confidence, your process, your communications, what have you. So I would look at those types of escalations as an opportunity to fix and educate. I know it sounds strange that sales would like misset expectations, but that used to happen a lot in the businesses that I was running. And I didn't look at it as sales, you're a bunch of assholes. I looked at it as, hey, sales needs to be educated, right? I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity. And it was, I would go back to the sales team and say, okay, so let me explain to you, this is what the customer heard from you. This is why it's not
Yes.
right. Here's the problems it creates. Here's how you should frame this moving forward, right? And don't expect sales to figure that out. You in the customer success role need to be the ones that take the lead and go to them and say, hey, here's what was said, or here's how they interpreted it, and here's what we ended up having to do and deal with in the aftermath. So can we work together and figure this out so we can avoid this in the future? Roger, thank you for your question. Jamie, if you could hit the done button on there, we'll get to the next person here. Alexandria asks, question is, what's the best way to own the escalation and acknowledge impact to the client without passing the buck to the engineering and product team? Likewise, if there are multiple systems at play, how can you mitigate customer churn if the solution is more than a month away? So it's something that we teach in our training. You can still own the escalation, but you're more of a program manager. You're more of a director. I think you need to acknowledge to the customer that you're owning it from I'm going to keep an eye on things. The stuff that needs to get done is out of my hands, but I'm going to continue to be your conduit. I'm going to continue to be your advocate, and that is going to. I think it's going to be important for the customer, but I also think that when you're working with product and engineering, that if you are the go-between, that you are not just reaching out to them and saying what's going on, that you are also conveying to them the emotion and the frustration that the customer may be having, especially if it's something that's taking an extended period of time. Now, if the solution is more than a month away, I think it's important that you understand exactly why it's going to take that month, what exactly the steps are that are taking it that long, so that you can go back and educate the customer and help them understand not just, hey, this isn't going to be fixed for a month, but it's here's why. Bring them closer to the process, help them understand why it's taking this amount of time, not just, hey, it's going to take a month. Justin, Jamie, what do you got to add?
I think that's a really great place to leverage your relationship and bring them into the fold, as you just said. The closer they are to all of the information, the closer they are to understanding the entire process, the less likely they are to churn and the more likely they are to expand and keep building on that relationship.
The only thing I'd add is ask sometimes the engineering team, what can I share with the customer during that time? And that varies by organization, because folks see something and are like, oh, you should just be able to change that. That doesn't look very hard. Well, it is really hard from an engineering standpoint. So I have found that in some of those long ones, if you ask the engineers, is there a update? Sometimes you have to translate it so it makes sense to the customer, but that can help them know that it's being worked on and that it is complex and, they're at this stage in it. So I have found that to be a valuable way to build trust.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexandria. Hope that answers your question. Thanks for joining us. Our next question comes from April. Thanks for joining us, April. April asks, with regards to identifying solutions that are not quite what the client had in mind, what is the best strategy to use when resetting expectations if they're attached to what they were originally thinking?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, and that's definitely one of the more difficult situations that you'll encounter.
Yep.
And I think very clear lines of communication can help, but again, there's a misalignment there, and I think this goes right back into the alignment conversation that we were just having. there's a misalignment there, and that misalignment needs to be understood. It needs to be repaired before there is any sort of move forward. And again, I keep emphasizing the importance of leveraging the relationship, but it's a really good time to lean on that relationship that you've been building and just say, look, this is what we have. This is what you were expecting. And it might be a really great time to review that roadmap and say, oh, you know what? There are 2 or 3 solutions coming down the pipe that will address exactly what you're looking for. And even if it's not exactly what you're looking for, I think that there are ways to build this in seamlessly that could ultimately provide greater value than what you were originally looking for.
I think this happens a lot with service. Sometimes not so much the product. From, if it, depending on how your implementation onboarding is or what sales is, this is one place I have found that resetting the level of service, there seems to sometimes be a misalignment. And Andrew, you said it perfectly. Go having the right relationships to eventually go back to sales and say, when you say this, the customer hears this, and this is why I'm dealing with this misalignment right now. When you say live support, they think you're going to get an answer within like 5 seconds, right? And it doesn't seem like it seems trivial. So that's is one area where I find sometimes this resetting expectations takes some time. It's trust. It's not easy, but I find it surfaces a lot in they have a different vendor, or they think they can just call you all the time, or they can meet every 3 days, and so it's just setting that putting it always in their objectives of what they're trying to succeed when from a service standpoint. You can say things like, let's say they want to meet with you every week, but the service should really be every other week. You can reposition that saying, if we have this time, we work really well asynchronously together. So for our tactical issues, let's keep using our normal communications there, and let's use our designated time to talk about how you want to move, going forward with the product. It's always acknowledging that you're not dropping anything ever when you're resetting their expectations. And I'm just approaching that from the service because that's the first thing that pops into my head when I read this is sort of that service expectation.
Yeah, there's a couple angles here that I think are important that we explore or that we talk about. First of all, as we teach in our How to Say No course, the no but is a great strategy. No, we can't do that, but here's what we can do. Also, 5 whys. Help me understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Help me peel back the onion because, while that may not have been what you had envisioned, but this is how you do it. I think we need to remind the customer that it's not custom software product. This is a single tenant, and we're helping you get from point A to point B. It's just not the path that you were expecting. But then that leads me back to ultimately questioning the enablement, the onboarding process, right? Because as part of an onboarding and enablement is just a tool for onboarding. Teaching them how to fish is just it's a way to get them onboarded. But you need to teach them when to fish, why to fish, how to fish, why we do fishing this way, right? So you need to help them understand not just how to use what you have, but why it's important they do it in a certain way. And so I would go back and question, did we do our best from a change management perspective to get this customer to adopt the way we do things in this new platform? All right, April, thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Jeff. Jeff asks, let's get vulnerable. Ooh. What mistakes did you make early in your career that you wish someone had warned you about? Justin, you wanted to jump in on this. That's bold. Let's get vulnerable here. Justin.
Yeah, I love this question because I think it can give really good insight into anyone making a career switch or someone who's new to CS. But we had touched on this a little bit today, and I think early in my career, I was so eager to solve problems that it was almost like having an itchy trigger finger, where I was so eager to solve problems that I wasn't taking the time to understand the problem. I wanted to be so quick to respond and so quick to show everybody how smart I was when I really wasn't being smart at all. When I wasn't taking the time to understand the problem. I wasn't taking time to understand the solution. I just wanted to be the person that responded as quickly as I could, to try to quell or qualm any issues that were going on. And I think just taking time to step back, breathe a little bit, and think about how you want to respond before you jump right in is not just a CS lesson. I think that kind of works for life too, but just taking some time to breathe, relax, and breathe in the question, instead of being so quick to respond to something that maybe I had no business responding to in the first place.
Jamie, you got anything to add?
Yeah, mine was especially in a starter. I agree with you, Justin. And I was like, oh yeah, I can think of several times I've done that. Um, especially in the startup environment, when um, you might have more direct access to the engineers or those who are fixing the problem, right? Because you don't have as many levels and layers of process and things like that. A mistake I made was thinking I really knew what the customer wanted, but didn't. And then when I submitted it over to engineering, I did it in a way that they understood what I wrote, because that's a whole like separate thing of knowing how to communicate to them. But it wasn't really what the customer wanted, which then resulted in rework. So that was like kind of going off what you said, Justin, of like I was anxious and I got it in, and I wasn't really fully understanding, and I didn't take that time to make sure with engineering, and we ended up having to go back and do rework, because it wasn't right. And so that burns bridges both places as well. So knowing how to communicate internally is really, really important. Because the best advice I ever got was an engineer when I first went over to the SaaS world said, the reason we ask for so many details, no fluff language, and things very clear is because if I put a comma in the wrong place, the whole system shuts down. And that was like his way of explaining to me why they're so technical and want this level of detail. And once I learned that, it really helped slow me down to make sure I have the right information to communicate out.
I made so many mistakes early in my career. I can't even, I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking, God, you know, I don't know, trusting sales, listening to sales, getting angry at sales, not communicating well with engineering, like you said, thinking I know what the customer is looking for. I mean, so many things that I wish people, and some people actually warned me about them, and I just didn't listen. So awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the question. Justin, if you can hit the done button. By the way, who put it in here about Vantif creating customer success? Yes, Rick. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I actually worked for Scopus Technology, which was a competitor to Vantif. And one of the reasons we don't mention Vantif in our content and really talk about Salesforce, because they're the ones who really kind of blew up the customer success space and with the Customers for Life program, which Dean Robeson, who's been on the program before, one of my advisors in the past, helped put together, was because when you say Vantif, people are like, who the hell is Vantif? Nobody knows Vantif, just like nobody knows Scopus anymore. But yes, Vantif, and John Luongo was who was the CEO at Vantif, was actually the first place where customer success appeared. So next question comes from Kayla. Kayla says, sometimes escalations require leadership decisions can be lengthy because of pushback, usually because it costs money. How do you buy time during this period? I actually, in our training, we actually suggest that customers don't escalate because it's going to it draws out the length of time it's going to take to solve their problem. And it's why I always coach my teams. I'm like, try and avoid an escalation. Let's figure out, you do 5 whys, no buts. Here's another way to do it. Come up with workarounds, anything you can, because those escalations that they're requiring end up taking a lot more time to address. But any suggestions that either of you have for Kayla? Beyond that?
Don't make escalations a verb that you use every day, right?
Yes,
That's kind of what you're saying, Andrew. I don't
exactly.
have anything more than that. I think so much of that depends on the structure and the size of your organization. But I have found that sometimes in startups, which I've spent a fair amount of time in, that like anytime a customer squeaks about something, it was an escalation. And so if you're leading CS, start changing that vocabulary now, because and going through develop that process to eliminate some of them, which you were talking about, Andrew, and going through that. I don't have much here. I think it's just transparency, what Justin was sharing before about understanding what your customer knows, and be very careful when you put certain leadership in front of a person, because and if you do it not for something that's truly an escalation, sometimes that backfires and you've lost all trust with your customers because they'll just go around you. So that's a lot of just good communication with your CS leader too, on what I see some head nodding from both Justin and Andrew there. So
I had an experience with a with somebody who went through our 12-week program last year who told me a story about an escalation being escalated, an escalation going up to their CTO, who was one of the co-founders, who did not have good bedside manner and viewed the person that had the escalation as a nuisance and ended up really damaging the relationship. And it was a sizable account because of the way they handled themselves on a call with the customer. And that's always a tricky situation because you got a founder, an owner that's kind of nosing into the situation. And my suggestion to this individual was, okay, you just need to keep that person away from your customers as much as possible.
It's definitely a sticky situation in growing organizations from startups to high scale,
Yeah.
where maybe those folks were the only ones they talked to at the beginning with legacy customers.
Yeah.
Definitely
100%.
a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and about a year ago, I transitioned into public sector accounts, and public sector accounts are a whole different animal because
Oh, yeah.
you need something from them. Be prepared to wait 3, 4, 6 months, but when they need something from you, they need it and they needed it 10 minutes ago, and it is the greatest escalation of all time. So sometimes just balancing and understanding your accounts is a really important part of knowing how to manage your own expectations of those escalations.
100%. Kayla, thanks for the question. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. We got about 5 more minutes. We'll get through as many of these questions as possible. Edgar, thanks for joining us. Edgar asks, how do you help and support your team to resolve the escalation at their level before it gets to you?
I think for me,
Greening.
it's about
Oh,
empowerment.
go ahead,
Oh,
Justin.
sorry,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jamie.
No, no, no.
I didn't mean to
We both
jump
went
in
at
on
the
your
same time.
toes.
No, you go first. You go first.
Yeah, no, for me, it's about empowerment. Is if you're providing your team with the tools necessary for them to succeed, then a lot of times they feel comfortable managing that escalation. And sometimes there are things that are just out of their grasp, out of their control, and that's when we have to take things up the ladder. But for me, it's all about empowerment and trying to provide them with as many tools as possible so that they feel comfortable managing those situations.
I love
Agree
that. I love the
completely.
empowerment piece. Yeah. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, agree completely, Justin. It is something if you need to, do you need to be coaching your teams, providing them the resources, teaching them the different tactics, teaching them to realize what really is a true escalation versus just an issue that needs to be solved. 100% agree with you, Justin.
The best way to deal with escalations, which is what we teach, as you know,
Yeah.
in the course, is to avoid them. Right. And part of that avoidance is empowering your people. And I used to empower my people. I used to explicitly empower them. If a customer is asking for something and you feel that it's going to cost less than X amount of dollars, like we need to do some additional consulting, we need to do blah, 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 blah. I spelled it out for them. It's going to cost X amount of dollars or X amount of work, then just freaking do it. Right? Let's get it done. Doesn't make sense to escalate it. It's going to take longer. It's going to actually end up costing us more. So just do it. So empowerment's key. Our next question comes from Randall. Is there an escalation you would handle differently if you could go back in time? Any lessons learned through error? Justin, you jumped in on this one.
Yeah, and I think this ties into exactly what we discussed before about lessons that I learned early in my career. But yeah, there were certainly escalations that I jumped on a little bit too quickly that probably ultimately caused more problems because I didn't understand the terms of the escalation. I didn't understand the players in the escalation. I, as Jamie said, maybe didn't provide the most technical language, and then things got bumped back and forth. So for me, it really is about, and I said this already, but taking time to breathe, taking time to understand, and not being so quick to jump into things. I definitely can remember instances where I caused more harm than good because, as I stated before, I just didn't fully understand the situation and wanted to try to be Superman before understanding exactly what needed to be addressed.
Jamie, anything to add?
I'll go real vulnerable here. I once had something that I escalated because I didn't know the product enough fully to know that that was something I could go and configure for the customer. So oh oh shit. So the lesson there is you got to know the product. You need to be spending the time and every organization's different on what they allow you access and things too. But yeah, that could have all been avoided if I would have actually known the product and some of the capabilities a little deeper.
I'm gonna add to that. You either got to know the product or you got to know somebody who knows the product.
Yes.
Right? When I was at Business Objects, I was at Business Objects through the Crystal acquisition, through the SAP acquisition for 5 years. And I will tell you this now. I never once built a report, ran reports. I went through a training at Crystal Decisions like the first week I was there, and I never touched the product. But I made I knew enough to be dangerous, and I had my guy Jay, who Jay I think still at SAP. Jay was basically my sales engineer. And whenever the conversation got too technical, whenever the conversation got too, I wasn't sure about stuff, I would say, you know what, that's a great question. I want to bring somebody in who can answer that question for you and steer you in the right direction because I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. Here's Jay. Right. So I knew my limitations. I knew my product. I knew my product conceptually enough where I could have conversations. I built some great relationships, had some amazing customers, Wells Fargo and Apple and Kaiser and you name it. I mean, just a who's who of customers in my book of business. But I also knew what I didn't know. Right, half of being smart is knowing what you're not smart at. We've reached the end of today's session, and I want to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. Your contributions make these discussions truly meaningful for our community. Thank you very much. I appreciate you both very much for joining us. To our audience, thank you for your active participation. Share your thoughts about today's session on LinkedIn by tagging myself, our guests, or Success Hacker or Success Coaching. We always love to hear your takeaways. Mark your calendars for our next CS Mastermind on August 20th, when we'll explore upselling and cross-selling without damaging customer trust. And we'll be releasing we'll actually have released our value-based selling training. So we'll have some really cool stuff to show you as well. Finally, let me leave you with this. Great customer-focused individuals know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them. And that's why we created this series. Have a great rest of your day and month, and we'll see you in August.